Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Accessible Street Studio open call info session. My name is Siobhan Edwards, and I am the lead for the Accessible Street Studio here in Detroit. I have my colleague, Kate Schubeck, joining to give an overview of New Lab. I will follow up with specifics about the studio and then ask our special guest from our partner, Michigan Central, Roshni Shokar, to join us for a short conversation to share more information about her organization, their vision, and our partnership. I will now turn it over to Kate to give our New Lab overview.
Great. Thank you so much, Siobhan. So some of you may be familiar with New Lab, but for anybody who's not, New Lab is a private company based in Brooklyn, New York, that's made up of a community of experts and innovators on a mission to apply transformative technology to help solve major challenges facing the world today. We leverage technologies across a range of domains, including robotics, AI, and computer vision, with the mission of transforming the things that matter most. And by that, we mean things like our health, our cities, and our infrastructure. Our business has two primary components. The first is our membership community, which is made up of over 800 entrepreneurs, engineers, and inventors that have access to our space and a suite of resources to help their companies scale. The second component is our studios. These are innovation programs in which we work with partners. It can be a Fortune 500 company or a government entity or a foundation, with the goal of bringing together our community and startups from across the world with industry and civic leaders to help co-design and test scalable solutions to these challenges. Siobhan will provide more information about the Accessible Street Studio shortly, which is a great example of what our studio model looks like in practice. So here are a few stats to give you a better sense of our community. New Lab's membership community includes more than 160 companies, which represent a collective value of $2.6 billion and have raised north of $700 million in funding. New Lab has 110,000 square feet of space across 2 locations, which include prototyping labs, collaborative workspaces, private offices for our members, conference rooms, and several event spaces. We also have a full-time product realization team on staff and over $5 million of on-site equipment to help our community members take a concept from an idea to a full working prototype. This includes one-on-one consultations with the product realization team that really supports an agile product development process, includes training, consultations, and full service fabrication. And it also has access to 3D printing, CNC, wood and metal shops, textiles, electronic benches, an agriculture lab, and more. It really runs the gamut of a full suite of resources. And then as you can see in these first 2 images, New Lab has 2 physical locations in Brooklyn, New York. So our headquarters is housed in an 84,000 square foot former shipbuilding facility, which is within the Brooklyn Navy Yard. And that's a 300-acre industrial campus that in a lot of ways operates like a mini city and functions as a living lab for our member companies to test out their products and technologies really in their own backyard. A short walk away, we have an additional building with more workspace and conference rooms, and this is really to accommodate our growing companies who need more space. And finally, we're excited to be expanding our physical footprint to Detroit. And as we solidify those plans, we are currently set up in a beta space there. So New Lab is proud to be home to a dynamic community of members. 23% of our companies are led by a female founder. 70% of founders have a master's degree or doctorate. 39% of our members are serial entrepreneurs, and 38% have relocated to our headquarters from somewhere outside of New York. And so these characteristics really all contribute to creating an ecosystem that's representative of a diverse set of perspectives and really brings a unique lens to the work that we do. So New Lab has created an interactive and networked community for our members. In addition to some of the physical resources that I went over, we also provide our members with access to networking opportunities and exclusive programming from a variety of subject matter experts that are relevant to their work. This includes vetted experts that help our startups navigate legal, communications, business development, or human resources topics. It also includes strategic introductions from the New Lab team or from others in our network And that can be advisors or investors or potential customers, again, that are relevant to the work that our companies are spearheading. There's an OS system that enables our members to connect with other members in the community and really seamlessly access the suite of resources provided by New Lab. And we have a very active Slack channel for quick answers to questions and some organic conversation in real time. So New Lab partners with a variety of entities. As I had mentioned, this can be Fortune 500 companies or business improvement districts. But really at the heart of these partnerships is these entities are all sharing a common goal of wanting to understand how they can tap into the New Lab ecosystem and network that we've built, and how they can leverage transformative technology to help solve some of these big industry and civic challenges that they're facing day to day. And this is a really nice segue into our partnership with Michigan Central and the Accessible Streets Studio. So I'll pass it back to Siobhan now to share more about that.
Thanks so much, Kate. So just like she mentioned, I'll now share details of the Accessible Streets Studio, which is focused on connecting neighborhoods by solving mobility challenges. So this studio is a collaboration between Ford's Michigan Central and New Lab to foster an ecosystem of startups, researchers, investors, and entrepreneurs. Its focus is on immediate mobility challenges in the neighborhoods around the Michigan Central train station. So for example, Corktown, North Corktown, Mexican Town, and Hubbard Richard. The goal here is to help deliver high impact projects that apply emerging technology to address community needs. So these are the focus areas the studio's pilot projects will be addressing. Just as a refresher, the research we completed over a 4-month period with various workshops and interviews with industry experts in Detroit and around the world, with local leaders and most important residents of the community have affirmed and contributed to building out these focus areas. These focus areas do not exist exclusively by any means. They're definitely interconnected into solving these mobility challenges that the residents are facing. So starting off here, bridging transportation gaps, we think of this as first and last mile challenges. So for example, getting to and from bus stops and making sure those residents have all multimodal options in getting around Detroit. The second focus area is fostering safe and welcoming streets. So here we're rethinking modes of transportation from the ground up. This looks like making streets more accessible for pedestrians, people with disabilities, public transit riders, and people using micromobility services. The third focus area is access to mobility information. So we think of this as making transportation information systems more connected and intuitive to enhance many elements of Detroiters' lives. We want to allow for a better connected network when it comes to the types of modes available, where those modes may be located, and the ability to access this information with and without a smartphone. The final focus area you'll see here is access to essential resources. So for example, accessing the basic necessities like groceries or cleaning products that can be out of touch without reliable access to transportation. So new mobility services can be used as a stepping stone that's necessary to get folks to and from work, doctor's appointments, schools, and much more. So here are some of the benefits to becoming a participant in the Accessible Streets Studio. So here on this slide, you'll see, for example, investment and exposure. So you would have access to grant funding, access to New Lab's robust corporate and investor network. You'll have exposure to press and additional corporate partners and programs. And from the pilot side, you would be able to work with Michigan Central, New Lab, and Detroit's community. You'd be able to use your company's technology and data to address Detroit residents' mobility needs in a meaningful and impactful manner. You'd be able to explore partnership opportunities with studio partners and the broader Detroit community and ecosystem. And from the community and space perspective, you'd access new labs locations, on-site prototyping resources, and peer community of over 160 companies. You'd be able to engage leading industry, venture, and academic experts. And you would be able to foster relationships with Detroit residents, relevant community organizations, and local mobility in the local mobility ecosystem in Detroit. So here you'll see a high-level snapshot of the Accessible Streets Studio timeline. So we launched our open call January 13th. The application submission period will remain open throughout February 24th, so you all have about 2 weeks left to apply. And remember, applications will be reviewed on a rolling basis. So the earlier you submit, the more access you'll have to me, our team, to ask questions, as well as for us to reach out and set up one-on-one calls. During the review process in March, we'll be in touch with teams as well, which again, as I noted, includes calls, emailing, kind of back and forth to make sure we're better understanding your application. We will then select the participants in April, and we'll notify those teams. And then piloting in Detroit will happen on a rolling basis as well, but will begin in May and continue throughout July. But before pilots launch, we'll make sure during that kind of gap period that we work with the team selected to set up your individualized pilot plans. You'd have access to a selected group of advisors and community members, as well as the residents. So before we move on, reminder, please feel free to drop any questions you all have in the chat window, because we'll have time for a public Q&A after. So now we'll transition to our conversation with Roshni Shokar from Michigan Central. So first, Roshni, welcome. Please give us a brief introduction and tell us a little bit more about you and your work.
Yeah, so my name is Roshni. I lead startup and entrepreneur engagement for Michigan Central. I've been with Ford for about 3 years, originally working for a startup called Go Ride Health at Ford, and then also working on the autonomous vehicle team. And I'm really excited about the Accessible Streets Studio. I think it really blends bringing together solving interesting challenges, and also in our home neighborhood of Detroit, or the neighborhoods of Detroit. So I'm so excited to see what we come up with here.
Awesome, that's great to hear. So just to start off, can you tell us a little bit more about the vision for Michigan Central?
Yeah, absolutely. So Ford and Michigan Central envision creating an open mobility innovation district in the city of Detroit. So the centerpiece of this development is the Michigan train station, the historic building that Ford bought a few years back and is restoring to create a mobility campus. But the goal here is not just to create a campus for Ford employees. About half the spaces surrounding the district will be intended for non-Ford employees. So innovators, startups in the mobility community that want to come work or partner, test their ideas. So we're really excited to create this open platform. There's going to be a variety of flexible spaces, testing spaces, and we really see it as a place for innovators to come collaborate and work together in order to create the future of mobility.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And just to follow up on that, is there some sort of website that people can go to find out additional information, or kind of see what the plans may or may not look like moving forward? Is there some sort of landing spot people can go to?
Yeah, so we have a website, michigancentral.com. We have a pretty active Facebook page that kind of just posts updates as there's press releases or with historic stories about Michigan Central. So those are the two main places now, and then we're building some other channels as well.
Awesome. So you talked about this innovation district that you all are trying to put together. So how does New Lab and the Accessible Street Studio fit into that vision of, a mobility innovation district?
Yeah, so New Lab and the Accessible Street Studio are one of our early initiatives to drive innovation and collaboration in this district. So from what we've seen, the New Lab model excels at bringing together, a diverse group of stakeholders in order to solve large macro challenges. And many of the challenges that, companies in the mobility industry are facing today are, these very large problems that can't be solved by themselves. And so we know that they're going to take a variety of partnerships in order to come up with ideas and succeed. And that's the whole point behind this district. And so, so the Accessible Street Studio is our first initiative in bringing together different minds in order to solve some of these challenges. So we're really excited to see, what comes. And I think the fact that these pilots will be in the neighborhoods around the district are even more exciting.
Great. Thanks for the kind words. So what do you think about the pilots, the Accessible Streets pilots themselves creating, the connectivity between Michigan Central and the surrounding neighborhoods? What are your thoughts, your perspective about that?
Yeah, I think it's very important in relation to our future vision for Michigan Central. So one of the big goals here is to create a space that feels authentic with the community, and Michigan Central has been really proactive about reaching out to the community and engaging those that live nearby in order to, make the space blend in with what their day-to-day lives are today. And so I think, already we're planning to have several spaces dedicated to being open to the community, definitely outdoor spaces and, the retail and all that'll be there. So we're excited to, be bringing other things into the community. But I think if we can also connect this space to the community and help people get there, I think that takes it up a level. And it'll really just make the whole district more lively, more exciting, and really help it shine. So I think it's a super important part of creating this district.
Awesome. And just to kind of tease out that thread a little bit more. So we heard directly from Detroit residents during our research about the transportation challenges they were experiencing. What do you think about the 4 focus areas we're trying to tackle with the Accessible Street Studio?
Yeah, I think they're very prominent challenges in Detroit. Siobhan, I know you've worked, in these spaces in the past too, and we've seen the same challenges come up again and again because they're really tough to solve. I think the thing that's great and important is that the New Lab team has done a really good job of understanding everything that's been done today and, trying to tease out what we can do better with these pilots in order to help them succeed. So I think, they're tough challenges, but they also could be really rewarding to work on. And I'm really excited to see what comes of them.
Great. We definitely are too. So from your perspective, putting on my my startup team hat, what does success look like for teams participating in the Accessible Street Studio from your point of view?
Yeah, I think one thing that's going to be important is connecting with the community. So making sure that we're really listening to input from the people who are participating in these pilots to make sure that they're, solving the true need and the crux of the issues that they're facing. And then I think another really important factor is that the pilots or the solutions are cost effective and they're sustainable. I think it's okay for, especially with startups, to be, somewhat reliant on funding or grants at the beginning. But I think the long-term goal is that these pilots will turn into solutions that continue to exist in the neighborhoods. And so we want to make sure that there is, some sort of revenue model or creative structure in place that can allow them to continue to thrive. Because I think the last thing we want to do is pop up a pilot in the community and then have to, take it away. That's almost worse sometimes than not having done it in the first place.
Exactly. Yeah. I agree with everything you just said, definitely. Well, those are all the questions I have for you, but we would definitely invite you to stay on because we're about to shift over to our public Q&A.
Happy
Um,
to.
so, if there are any questions you all want to ask Roshni from the Michigan Central perspective, any questions about the Accessible Street Studio and New Lab, specifically, please feel free to pop them in the chat, and then we'll kind of go through and answer them. So give me 1 second as I. Okay, so this question looks like it's for Roshni. So, what will Michigan Central's role be in engaging with startups during the pilots?
Yeah, great question. So we definitely plan to be involved throughout the process. I'm personally really excited to, see where these pilots go. New Lab will be hosting a series of workshops throughout the engagement in order to kind of help the startup teams, brainstorm solutions, help these pilots launched. So we're planning to have a role in those workshops. And then we also have very regular meetings with the New Lab team. So as a startup may be facing like a challenge that someone at Michigan Central has, the right contact or relationship to kind of help, solve that, we're also happy to help like plug in those connections and do whatever we can to help these pilots succeed.
Gotcha. Awesome. Okay, let's see. We have a question. This is a general question, will the session video be shareable to those who didn't sign up for the session? Yes. This is being recorded. We will be sharing this out once we kind of go through and make sure all our ducks are in a row. So yes, the session is recorded and it will be available. Let's see here. I see a question about funding opportunity for these pilots. So yes, there is funding available, as we mentioned in the deck. So basically, there will be $200,000 non-dilutive grant funding available that will be equally dispersed amongst the teams, depending upon how many teams we kind of go with. And we're looking at anywhere between 5 and 10 teams. Looks like there's another question here. If we've already applied for another New Lab opportunity, should we also be able to apply for Accessible Streets? Yes, definitely. So, we have a few open calls kind of based off of our other studios live right now. If you feel like your company and technology is applicable across the different studios, please feel free to apply to whatever you see open, and internally we'll make sure we note that you've applied to other studios and figuring out kind of what makes sense there. But yes, definitely, please feel free to apply across the different studios.
Cool. I'm happy to pop in, Siobhan, and maybe lob some of these questions for you to answer. So it looks like one of the next ones is, could you provide a bit more information on what a pilot plan entails when we're asking companies to think about what their pilot plan looks like for the studio?
Sure, I can, and Kate, please feel free to jump in. But a pilot plan looks like it's kind of expounding more on what you submitted in your application. So that looks like, planning for, when your team is going to be here, what that technology looks like, how it's going to be implemented here in Detroit. That looks like, whether you may or may not need a permit to operate, making sure the correct collaborators are involved from a city perspective, a state perspective, other stakeholders involved. Kate, do you want to chime in on anything else I may have missed?
Yeah, that was great, Siobhan. I think it's basically thinking about what your concept is and kind of the couple months timeline of the studio in order to deploy your technology or your product, and then thinking through all of those steps Siobhan just outlined. So everything from getting the right resources on board and the right folks in the room in order to launch successfully, and then thinking through the actual deployment and kind of ability to be able to have that pilot run successfully in the given neighborhoods. I think it's also important to hear a little bit about what your outcomes and kind of key performance metrics are for your pilot, what you're really driving toward trying to solve and bring to Detroit. And all of those pieces are really helpful for our team to understand how your pilot will make an impact in the Detroit area. Great. I think another interesting one, Siobhan, for you to expand on a bit is, can you talk about the timing for the pilot launches and how those will be determined? Is it kind of based on the pilot and a little bit of the timeline of the studio? How do you envision those pilots rolling out?
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned before, the pilots will be launching on a rolling basis. So we'll start pilot launches in May, and kind of depending on what's needed for your pilot, how quickly we can kind of get it up and running, if it's going to take a little bit longer in terms of, additional collaboration from other stakeholders, that kind of will determine the timeline of your pilot deploying. But the pilots will kind of launch on a rolling basis. There'll be, opportunities for community and resident feedback as your pilot is being launched, all of that type of stuff. So basically, making sure during that pilot planning period, we know, okay, we'll need an additional 2-3 weeks to make sure we're reviewing this with the appropriate people that need to be engaged to help us make sure that the launch is successful, et cetera.
Awesome, thank you. It looks like we have another one for Roshni here. Will there be opportunities to continue to engage with Michigan Central after pilots have launched?
Yeah, there will be. So as I mentioned, part of the vision for Michigan Central is a space for entrepreneurs and innovators to kind of come work together. And so in the district, we're going to have co-working spaces, testing spaces that would all be options for, a startup founder to kind of partake in if you're interested after the New Lab Studio is over. And another option is we also have a variety of programming that we've been launching that's relevant for mobility founders. So events, hopefully in the future in person. Right now they're virtual, and also just resources that we're kind of building out for the community. And so all of those are open for any of the people who are partaking in these pilots as well.
Great, thanks so much. Another question here, Siobhan, is outside of guidance and the opportunity to demonstrate our products, what do specific time commitments and funding look like? So I know you touched on the funding piece already, but maybe you could talk a little bit about what the journey looks like for studio participants once they're selected, and kind of a rough idea of timeline and commitment for the studio.
Sure. So once all of the applications are in on February 24th, so make sure you all are getting ready to send your applications in. We'll be reviewing those throughout the month of March. So at any point in time throughout the month of March, we'll be reviewing those with our New Lab team, our partners at Michigan Central. So for example, like Roshni and select studio advisors. We'll go through, kind of review, contact you all if we have any questions when reviewing your application. And then in April, kind of once you're notified from there, then we figure out, okay, COVID is a factor here, but what does it look like for a team member or some members of your team to kind of get to Detroit, whether that's, we're doing some sort of Detroit guided tour or some sort of sending out information about who Detroit is, basically, what who the residents are, how we've been engaging with them, some of our research, et cetera. So that around April-ish through May-ish is when that kind of those kind of conversations will happen, and timing, kind of figuring out when and where your pilot will be located, and in terms of where your team will be. From there, so from kind of the May timeframe, we will start launching the pilots. So in the midst of us starting to launch the pilots, there will be opportunities for startup teams to continue to engage with our studio advisors, some members of the community, as well as we'll have a group of neighborhood and resident advisors as well, to be able to kind of have that firsthand one-on-one conversation with residents, and seeing kind of where they're at, seeing how what they're thinking about your technologies, all of that type of stuff. And then from the May through July timeline is when the pilots will be deployed. If any pivots need to happen, they can happen in that time period, and assessment of pilots, et cetera.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Siobhan. That was great. I'm happy to maybe take this question. Someone asked, will you be sharing some of your research with teams during future sessions for us to think about how best to participate? So I think I'd say first, there's additional information on the Accessible Streets webpage about the focus areas that's really informed by a lot of the research and conversations that we had. But as I think Siobhan has mentioned, once teams are selected, it's really a kind of a collaborative co-design process. So the selected startups will be working closely with the studio team, with Michigan Central, with a group of great Detroit-based advisors that we've brought on board to help us. And really, these collective set of perspectives are a great brain trust and kind of help for guiding the development of your pilot, some of the main aspects it should have, and kind of more of those nuances about the specific issues and challenges that Detroit residents are facing. So there'll definitely be opportunity to share those learnings and to make sure that the teams that are coming to Detroit and participating in this studio have the benefit of a lot of those great perspectives and the work that's been done to date. Great. So there's another question here. Maybe Roshni, you could take a shot at this. It's about the City One Challenge, and just hearing a bit more about how you see City One and Accessible Streets kind of existing, and if there's opportunities for crossover between those two programs as well.
Yeah, definitely. I was just starting to type a response to that one, so happy you grabbed it. So we're working closely with the team that plans the City One challenges, and so they've been in contact with New Lab. And I would say, like, while the challenge and like the call for startups is similar, New Lab's approach, and I think the approach to like getting the pilots launched and the workshops, that part will be unique. So it is kind of like a different effort. But we are having the City One challenge team like reach out to past startups and finalists that have entered that are relevant to these challenge areas. And there's definitely an opportunity to resubmit something, that you may have submitted in the past and wasn't a fit then. I think there's still an option, there's still an opportunity that it could be a great fit for this studio.
Awesome, thank you. Great. So another one, maybe Siobhan, you can take a stab at. So based on the quick timeline, I'm assuming you're looking for prototypes and kind of tested products and concepts. Could you talk a bit more about the growth stage of applicants, or kind of where their products should be for participation in the studio?
Sure. So I think, we're looking at teams where we can physically like see, touch, use your product. Basically, that's kind of what we're looking for, because as I mentioned, the timeline for pilot deployment is just a few months there, and because this studio is so focused on resident and community needs, like we need to be able to see something that's tangible that can be applicable to the day-to-day lives of our residents and community.
Awesome, thanks. Okay, another one here. So how long are studio participants expected to be in Detroit for?
as long as you want to be in Detroit for it. We definitely expect you. So if you're notified that you're going to be a participant in the studio, we expect you from when your pilots are launching to be there, right, throughout the end. Obviously, additional conversations can be had depending on the successes of the pilot, but we expect you, like, once you're notified, like, we need to have a plan for what what it looks like for someone from your team or your whole team to be here in Detroit in a safe way, obviously. But if y'all want to stay longer, like, we definitely welcome that. We love welcoming in new guests and turning everybody into Detroiters. Yes.
Awesome. Yeah. So one point I'll add on top of that is it doesn't have to necessarily be consecutively. So we realize that we're asking folks to apply that obviously aren't based in Detroit. And we've had experience with some of our other studios. Let's say that the pilots are happening in New York, and we'll have a startup from somewhere else across the country participate. And so there'll be kind of specific dates and milestones that get fleshed out in much more detail, where those teams are expected to be on site or be present or be engaged on those dates. But of course, okay, if there's kind of a back and forth between your home base and Detroit. Great. So here's a good one, Siobhan. Do you want to talk a bit about the factors that will be considered when evaluating applications?
Sure. So pilot feasibility is going to be huge. So looking at, okay, if you have some sort of technology that we have to, like, dig up a whole street to put in, that's going to be, a factor where we're like, okay, so you might get a call from us, you might get a meeting request to really figure out, like, okay, what do you mean we need to dig up the whole street? Can we just take, maybe a smaller subsection of the technology or product and maybe put it somewhere else, or just kind of figuring out how we can do that? Again, we're on a shorter time frame here, so we want to make sure that we're definitely understanding, the uniqueness and the feasibility of the technology and pilot that's being proposed. So that's one, making sure that the startup teams are definitely interested in learning more from residents, right? So, like, they're the experts here in terms of what's needed and the challenges that they're facing. So making sure that, startup teams are in a place where they can, accurately and, effectively communicate between, not only the New Lab team and our advisors, but also residents in the community is definitely important. So that'll be a strong criteria as well. And, just other, factors in looking at different pilots. So, like, where's your team base? Like, we'll look at that. Are you all able to get here? We'll look at that. The relevance of your technology to the actual pilots, to the actual focus areas is going to be important too. So there'll be, definitely different factors that are considered. But if we have any questions, we'll definitely reach out as we're reviewing those applications.
Excellent. Great. Thanks so much, Siobhan. I'm pretty sure that's it for questions. So I'll flip it back to you to wrap us up here.
Awesome. So thank you, everyone, for your participation. We want to definitely thank our guest, Roshni from Michigan Central. Please make sure you all, if you're interested, please apply. You only have a couple weeks left. And here is, my information. If you have any additional questions, happy to set up a call to kind of review them, happy to respond via email. And then the Michigan Central website is also included in the chat if you want to have any more, questions or need any additional information. But that's all we have. So thank you, everyone, for joining, and we're looking forward to reviewing your applications.